The crystal chandelier above the dining table cast shadows that danced across 40 faces, each one turned toward me with varying degrees of pity, curiosity, or barely concealed satisfaction. Derek stood at the head of his mahogany table, the one he'd bragged cost $18,000, his wine glass raised like a victory banner. His wife Amanda perched beside him in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, her smile the kind that never quite reached her eyes. Derek's voice carried that particular tone he'd perfected over the years, the one that sounded warm to strangers but felt like ice to anyone who really knew him. "I want to share some exciting news with everyone. Amanda and I just closed on a penthouse in Georgetown. 3 bedrooms, rooftop terrace, the works." Polite applause rippled through the room. I sat at what they called the family table, tucked near the kitchen door where the catering staff kept brushing past with apologetic murmurs. Not the main table where Derek's colleagues and Amanda's society friends held court. Not even close. Amanda's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. "Of course, this means we'll need to make some changes. The guest room here won't be available anymore, so we've found the perfect solution for Margaret." She always called me Margaret, never Mom, though she'd been married to my son for 3 years. "There's a wonderful assisted living community in Fairfax, very upscale, only $4,000 a month." The woman next to me, someone's wife whose name I'd forgotten, gasped softly. $4,000. To them, it sounded reasonable for warehousing an aging widow. Marcus, my younger son, nodded from his seat at the main table. 35 years old, and he still followed his brother's lead in everything. "It makes sense, Mom. You're 62. You shouldn't be living alone in that townhouse anymore. What if something happens?" Something, they always said something with such grave concern, as if being 62 meant I was teetering on the edge of complete incapacity. Never mind that I ran 5 miles every morning, that I could still recite poetry in 4 languages, that my mind remained sharper than both of theirs combined. The guests shifted in their seats, some staring into their wine glasses, others watching with the kind of fascination people reserve for car accidents, waiting to see how the old woman would react, whether I'd cry, whether I'd beg. I placed my napkin beside my plate with deliberate precision. The linen was real, I noticed. Derek spared no expense for appearances. My fingers remained steady even as my heart hammered against my ribs with something that wasn't quite rage, wasn't quite grief. Something colder, clearer. "That's very thoughtful of you both." Derek's eyebrows lifted slightly. He'd expected resistance, tears, the kind of maternal guilt trip that might make him look bad in front of his guests. My calm seemed to unsettle him more than any outburst could have. "We just want what's best for you, Mom. You're not getting any younger, and with your military pension, it's got to be tight living on $4,200 a month." $4,200. He'd done the research, apparently. Knew exactly what a retired lieutenant colonel's pension looked like on paper. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the pension was the smallest line item in my financial portfolio. The one I barely noticed hitting my account each month, except as confirmation that the direct deposit still worked. Amanda leaned forward, her concern as genuine as cubic zirconia. "We've already taken the liberty of scheduling a tour for next week. The facility has wonderful activities. Bingo on Tuesdays, chair yoga on Thursdays." Chair yoga. Because at 62, apparently, I needed a chair to exist. I pulled my phone from my purse. The guests watched as I opened my banking app, the one with the discreet logo that meant nothing to anyone who didn't move in certain financial circles. My fingers moved across the screen with the same precision I'd used for 40 years to parse intercepted communications, to catch the lies that lived between words. Before we discuss my living arrangements, I should probably clarify something about my financial situation. Derek's jaw tightened. He hated when I interrupted his carefully orchestrated moments. Mom, this isn't about money. This is about your safety. Humor me. I turned the screen toward him, toward the quarterly dividend statement that had arrived that morning. $4.2 million. The interest from 1/4 of ownership in a company most people had never heard of, but every military contractor knew by reputation. The color drained from Derek's face in stages. First, the ruddy glow of his second glass of Cabernet faded. Then the healthy tan he maintained with weekly sessions at some exclusive gym turned sallow. Finally, a grayish pallor settled in that made him look every one of his 38 years plus a decade more. That can't be right. I pulled the phone back, locked the screen, returned it to my purse. That's 1/4's dividend from Crescent Solutions. Perhaps you've heard of them. Your investment bank handles their accounts, I believe. The woman next to me inhaled sharply. Even the society wives knew that name. Crescent Solutions held contracts with the Pentagon, State Department, CIA. An $80 million valuation at last assessment, though I suspected it was worth more now. Marcus found his voice first, though it came out strangled. You own Crescent Solutions. 75%. I founded it in 1995. Built it over 30 years while you all thought I was just a retired housewife living on a pension. Amanda's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. But you live in that tiny townhouse. You drive a Toyota. A 2018 Camry, yes. Reliable. Paid in cash. Much like the townhouse, which I also own outright. Much like the 4 rental properties generating another $18,000 a month in passive income. Much like the investment portfolio my late husband and I built that's worth considerably more than Derek's penthouse. The silence that followed felt alive, predatory. Every eye in that room locked onto me with a hunger that made my skin crawl. Not respect, not admiration, calculation. The mental recalibration of how they'd treat me now that the math had changed. Derek recovered first, his banker's instincts kicking in. Mom, this is incredible. Why didn't you tell us? We could have helped you manage it, diversified your holdings. I have excellent financial advisors, the same ones I've used for 20 years. But family should. Family? I let the word hang in the air like smoke. You called me a burden 30 seconds ago, suggested assisted living where I could play bingo twice a week. Now that you know I have money, suddenly family matters. His face flushed red this time, anger replacing shock. That's not fair, we were trying to help. I stood. 62 years of carrying myself with military posture made the movement fluid despite the arthritis I'd never admit to. Here's what's fair, Derek. For the past 8 years, since your father died, you've treated me like an obligation. A checkmark on your list of filial duties. You seated me at the kitchen table tonight while strangers sat at the main table. You forgot my birthday 2 years running. You've made it abundantly clear that in your world, I'm invisible unless I'm useful. Amanda started to speak, but I raised one hand. The gesture was small, but it carried decades of command presence, of briefing generals, of stopping rooms full of men mid-sentence with nothing but a look. I kept my success private for 40 years. Do you know why? Because I wanted to see who people really were when they thought I had nothing to offer. Turns out, most people only respect power they can see, my own sons included. Marcus pushed back from the table, his chair scraping against Derek's expensive hardwood. Mom, that's not we didn't. You did, you both did, and I let you because I wanted to be sure. I wanted to give you every chance to love me for who I am, not what I have. The guests had stopped pretending not to listen. Some looked ashamed, others fascinated. A few, I noticed, were already pulling out their phones, probably texting their own children with newfound appreciation. Derek's voice dropped to that dangerous quiet that reminded me uncomfortably of my brother Vincent. So this was a test. You've been testing us for 8 years. No, I've been watching. Testing implies I was looking for a specific result. I was simply observing who you chose to become without the influence of my money. And you failed. The words landed like a slap. Derek's face went through another series of color changes. Amanda gripped his arm, but he shook her off, stepping toward me with the kind of aggressive posture that made several guests shift nervously. You know what I think? I think you're bitter. Dad's been gone 8 years and you're still angry at the world. You built this company in secret because you couldn't stand that Uncle Vincent was more successful, more respected. Vincent, I laughed, and the sound surprised even me. Bitter, yes, but also genuinely amused. You're Uncle Vincent, the war hero. Don't talk about him like that. I'll talk about him however I like. He's my brother, which means I know things about him you don't. Derek crossed his arms. Like what? The words were right there, perched on my tongue. The investigation. The evidence I'd turned over to the Pentagon Inspector General 3 months ago. The arrest warrant that was probably being prepared even as we stood here arguing in his overpriced dining room. But I held back, not because Derek deserved protection from the truth, because Vincent's victims deserved to hear it first. The families of the 23 people who died because my brother valued profit over human life. They'd earned the right to know before it became gossip at society dinners. Ask me again in a few weeks. You might find the answer illuminating. I collected my coat from the hall closet. Nobody tried to stop me. 40 people watched in silence as I walked through Derek's foyer, past the abstract art that cost more than most people's cars, past the marble that Amanda had insisted on importing from Italy. At the door, I turned back. Derek stood frozen in the dining room archway, his expensive suit suddenly looking like costume on a child playing dress-up. Marcus hovered behind him, uncertain. For what it's worth, I did love you both enough to keep giving. Every scholarship fund your Uncle Vincent took credit for, that was me. Every investment opportunity he supposedly arranged. My money, my connections. The $500,000 each of you thought he'd gifted you. I put that in trust before your father died. Vincent just signed the papers. Derek's mouth fell open. The trusts, those were yours. Every dollar. I'll have my attorney send documentation, along with the paperwork removing Vincent as trustee and adding my name. I think it's time you understood exactly where your good fortune came from. Mom, wait. But I was already gone, pulling the door shut on his protest, on Amanda's strangled gasp, on the whispers that erupted the moment they thought I couldn't hear. The November air hit my face like a blessing. Cold, clean, honest in a way that warm house with its expensive lies could never be. My phone buzzed as I reached my Camry. Unknown number, but the area code was familiar. Pentagon Exchange. Margaret Rousseau. The voice on the other end was crisp, female, carrying the weight of stars even through a cell phone connection. Mrs. Rousseau, this is General Patricia Morrison. I apologize for calling on a holiday, but we have a situation that requires your immediate attention. My hand stilled on the car door. General Morrison chaired the Defense Language Oversight Committee. We'd crossed paths twice at conferences, but she'd never called me directly. What kind of situation? The kind we can't discuss over an open line. Can you come to the Pentagon tomorrow morning? 800 hours. That's Thanksgiving Friday. I'm aware, this can't wait. Something in her tone made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The same instinct that had kept me alive through 2 deployments, that had helped me identify threats before they materialized. Does this concern Crescent Solutions? A pause, then. It concerns your brother. The world tilted slightly. I gripped the car door to steady myself. Vincent. Tomorrow, 800 hours. Come to the earring entrance. I'll have a visitor pass waiting. She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my car for a long moment watching Derek's house through the windshield. Lights blazing from every window. Shadows moving behind expensive curtains. My sons, probably arguing about what just happened. Probably calling Vincent right now, asking him what the hell was going on. Let them call. Let them ask their questions and get his carefully crafted lies in response. By this time tomorrow, I'd know exactly what the Pentagon had found. And something told me it would make tonight's revelation look like a gentle warm-up. The drive back to Arlington gave me too much time to think. 40 years of memories crowding in like uninvited guests. I'd spent so long building walls between who I was and who my family thought I was. Now those walls were crumbling, and I wasn't entirely sure what would be left standing when the dust settled. My townhouse welcomed me with familiar silence. 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, 1,200 square feet of space that Derek would call cramped and Amanda would dismiss as quaint. But the mortgage was paid off. The furniture was comfortable. The bookshelves held volumes in 7 languages that I actually read, not just displayed for effect. I made tea. Earl Grey, the expensive kind I allowed myself because why the hell not? Sat at my kitchen table with the chipped corner that I'd never bothered to replace because it reminded me of David. He'd done that, moving furniture the week we'd bought this place 18 years ago. Laughed about it. Said it gave the table character. God, I missed him. Missed the way he'd know exactly what I was feeling just by the set of my shoulders. Missed his quiet support, his unshakable belief that what I was building mattered even when nobody else could see it. The photo on my mantle showed us on our wedding day. I was 22, fresh out of Georgetown, commissioned as a second lieutenant with my whole life ahead of me. David stood beside me in his own uniform, infantry branch insignia gleaming on his collar. We looked impossibly young, impossibly hopeful. I did it, I told his image. I told them, not all of it, but enough. He would have been proud, would have probably said I should have done it years ago, but he'd also understood why I waited, why I needed to see who they'd become without the corrupting influence of visible wealth. My phone buzzed again. Text from a number I didn't recognize at first, then realized with a jolt was Marcus. He must have gotten a new phone. Mom, please, we need to talk. Can I come over? I stared at the message for a long time. 40 years of watching, waiting, hoping that one of them would see me without prompting, without crisis forcing their hand. Not tonight, I need space. His response came immediately. Tomorrow, then. I have an appointment. We'll talk when I'm ready. No response to that. Good. Let him sit with the uncertainty. Let him wonder what else he didn't know about his own mother. I finished my tea and climbed the stairs to my bedroom. The November moon cast silver light through windows I'd never bothered to cover with the heavy drapes Amanda insisted every house needed. I liked seeing the sky. Liked the reminder that there was a whole universe beyond family drama and corporate intrigue. Sleep eluded me. I lay awake thinking about General Morrison's call, about Vincent, about the investigation I'd helped build over the past year, feeding evidence to the Inspector General's office like breadcrumbs leading to a wolf's den. It had started innocuously enough. A conversation with one of my linguists, an Afghan woman named Layla Hassan who worked as a project coordinator for Crescent Solutions. She'd mentioned her father, Rashid, who'd worked as an interpreter before being killed in an ambush in 2013. Officially, the report listed his death as Taliban action, but Layla had questions, inconsistencies, things that never quite added up. I'd pulled the files, called in favors, Dug through archives that technically I shouldn't have had access to, but nobody questioned a former lieutenant colonel with the right credentials asking polite questions. What I found made my blood run cold. Rashid Hassan hadn't died in a random Taliban attack. He'd been set up, used as bait in an operation that went sideways. And the general who'd approved that operation, who'd signed off on using local interpreters as expendable assets. Vincent Chen, my brother, the war hero, the man my sons worshipped as the family success story. It got worse. Rashid wasn't the only one. Over 18 months of careful investigation, working with a retired JAG Corps friend and a forensic accountant I'd hired through 3 layers of legal protection, we'd identified a pattern. 11 interpreters, all dead under suspicious circumstances, all working for Vanguard Linguistics, a contractor that provided cut-rate services to the military. Vanguard's CEO was Vincent's West Point classmate, and Vincent had received $2.3 million in consulting fees over 6 years, money he'd never declared on financial disclosures, money that came from a company that was getting people killed. I'd turned over everything to the Inspector General 3 months ago, every document, every financial record, every communication I could recover or reconstruct. I'd done it quietly, through lawyers, with enough legal protection that Vincent couldn't trace it back to me directly. But General Morrison's call suggested that was about to change, that my role as whistleblower was about to become public knowledge. Which meant Derek and Marcus would find out I hadn't just exposed their uncle. I'd systematically built a case against him knowing it would destroy his reputation, end his lucrative post-retirement consulting career, possibly send him to prison. They'd call it betrayal, family destroying family. I called it justice. The moon crossed my window and I still hadn't slept. Around 3 a.m, I gave up, went downstairs, made more tea, pulled out the folder I kept in my safe, the one with all the faces. 23 of them, 11 interpreters, 8 American soldiers who died in the ambushes those compromised interpreters had enabled, 4 contractors who'd been collateral damage, each one a person, each one someone's child, parent, sibling, friend. Rashid Hassan smiled from his photo, 45 years old, father of 3, fluent in Pashto, Dari, and passable English, dead because my brother had valued money over lives. I'm sorry, I told his picture, told all of them. I'm sorry it took so long, I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. But I'd make it right, or as right as it could be when the dead stayed dead, and all you could offer was truth and consequences. By 7:30 the next morning, I was dressed in my most conservative suit, navy blue, perfectly tailored, the kind that spoke of professional competence without ostentation. Pearl earrings David had given me for our 20th anniversary. Light makeup that made me look put together without trying too hard. I studied my reflection in the hallway mirror. 62 years looked back at me. Silver hair I'd stopped coloring 5 years ago because life was too short to fight nature. Lines around my eyes that came from smiling and squinting at documents in 7 languages. The face of a woman who'd built empires in secret and was about to burn them all down for something that mattered more. The drive to Pentagon City took 40 minutes through morning traffic. I parked in visitor parking, walked to the earring entrance with my purse clutched perhaps too tightly. The guard checked my ID against the visitor list, nodded, handed me a pass. General Morrison's expecting you, ma'am. 3rd floor, room E384. The Pentagon's corridors always made me feel small and significant at the same time. Small because of the weight of history in these walls, the decisions made here that shaped the world. Significant because I'd been part of that world, had contributed to that history, even if my name would never appear in the official accounts. General Morrison's aide showed me into a conference room that was determinedly neutral. Beige walls, government issue furniture, coffee that smelled burnt from sitting too long. Morrison herself entered 3 minutes later. 2 stars on her collar, gray hair cut military short, eyes that missed nothing. She carried a folder thick enough to be a weapon. "Mrs. Rouso, thank you for coming." We shook hands. Her grip was firm, professional. She gestured to a chair and I sat. "I'll get straight to it. The Inspector General's investigation into General Vincent Chen has concluded. We have sufficient evidence to proceed with charges. Fraud, conspiracy, negligent homicide. The JAG Corps is preparing the case for court-martial." My hands remained steady in my lap, but my heart performed acrobatics. "When?" "Arrest Monday morning. We wanted to inform you first, given your role in building the case and your familial relationship." "My sons don't know yet." "No, and they won't unless you choose to tell them. But Mrs. Rouso, I need to be clear about something." She opened the folder, pulled out a document. "Your testimony will be required. This will become public. Your family will know you were the source." I'd known this moment would come, had prepared for it, but knowing and experiencing were different creatures. "I understand." Morrison studied me with those sharp eyes. "I've read your file. Lieutenant Colonel, 20 years active duty, intelligence. Bronze Star in the Gulf War. Pioneered some of our current cultural liaison protocols. You could have made general yourself if you'd stayed in." "I had other priorities." "Your husband's illness." "And my sons. Though in retrospect, I'm not sure I did them any favors prioritizing their stability over my career." A ghost of a smile crossed Morrison's face. "Children are complicated." "That's diplomatic phrasing." She leaned back in her chair. "Off the record, what you did took guts. Turning in your own brother, most people wouldn't have the stomach for it. Most people didn't spend 40 years watching him be praised for heroism, while I was dismissed as a hobbyist. Most people don't know what it's like to be invisible in their own family." "Is that what this is about? Revenge?" The question didn't anger me. It deserved honesty. A year ago, I would have said no, that it was purely about justice, about those 23 people who deserved better. But sitting here now, I met her gaze directly. Maybe there's some satisfaction in proving that the languages everyone dismissed as useless were the exact tools needed to expose a war criminal. Maybe I'm not entirely noble in my motivations. Morrison's smile grew. "I like you, Mrs. Rouso. You're honest. We need more of that around here." She pulled out another document, this one with Department of Defense letterhead. "Before you leave, there's one more thing. The DoD Linguistic Services Review Board would like to offer you a position as senior advisor. Help us rebuild interpreter oversight, prevent another Vanguard situation. Pay would be GS-15 level, full benefits." I hadn't expected that. I'm 62. "And you run an $80 million company. Age clearly isn't slowing you down. This would be 2 days a week, advisory capacity. Help us do better." The offer was tempting. A chance to make real systemic change, to ensure Rashid Hassan and the others hadn't died for nothing. But it would also make me even more visible, would cement my role as the person who destroyed Vincent. "Can I think about it?" "Take your time. The offer stands regardless of how the trial plays out." She walked me to the door. In the hallway, she paused. "Mrs. Rouso, your brother is going to fight this. He has resources, connections. It could get ugly." "It's already ugly. The question is whether we're willing to look at it honestly or keep pretending it's beautiful." I drove home in a daze, Morrison's folder sitting on my passenger seat like a ticking bomb. Arrest Monday morning. Charges filed. Trial to follow. My brother, the decorated general, would be in handcuffs before the week was out. And my sons would know I'd put him there. My phone started ringing before I even got home. Derek first, then Marcus, then Derek again. I let them go to voicemail. Whatever they had to say could wait until I'd had time to process everything. The weekend stretched ahead like a minefield. I spent Saturday in my garden, pulling weeds that didn't need pulling, trimming bushes that were already perfectly shaped. Physical work that let my mind wander. Sunday brought rain and too many memories. I found myself pulling out old photo albums. There was Vincent at 18, West Point uniform crisp and perfect. Our parents beaming with pride. Me in the background, 16 and already learning to make myself small. Vincent at his commissioning. Vincent at his first promotion. Vincent shaking hands with a senator. Vincent, Vincent, Vincent. The golden child who could do no wrong. There was one photo of me, just one, my Georgetown graduation. I stood alone in my cap and gown because our parents hadn't come. Vincent had been at Ranger School. I'd celebrated with Yasmin and her husband, had pretended it didn't hurt that my own family couldn't be bothered. I closed the album, put it back in storage where it belonged. Monday morning arrived with cold sunshine and a sense of inevitability. I made coffee, read the news, waited for my phone to ring. It did at 9:15, Derek's number. "Mom," his voice shook. "Uncle Vincent was just arrested. Military police showed up at his house this morning. They're saying he's being charged with war crimes." I closed my eyes. I know. "You know, how do you?" He stopped. The silence stretched long enough for understanding to dawn. "Oh my God, you did this. You're the one who turned him in." I provided evidence to an ongoing investigation. Evidence of criminal activity that resulted in 23 deaths. "He's our uncle. He's family." And those 23 people were somebody's family too. Derek's breathing was ragged. "I can't believe this. I can't believe you'd do this. After everything he's done for us." "What has he done for you, Derek, specifically?" "He paid for college. He got Marcus his first job contacts. He's been there. He signed some papers. I paid for college. Every dollar. I got Marcus his contacts through my company connections. I've been there your entire lives. You just didn't notice because you were too busy worshiping a lie." "You're lying." "I'm really not. Ask your attorneys. Ask mine. Check the trust documentation I said I'd send. It's all there. 30 years of me supporting you while Vincent took credit." I could hear him struggling to breathe. "Why? Why would you do that?" "Support you, because you're my son." "Hide it, let him take credit." "Because I wanted to see who you'd become without expectations. I wanted to know if you'd love me anyway." "That's insane." "Maybe, but it's honest, which is more than I can say for the family that raised me." He hung up. I sat holding my phone, listening to dead air, feeling the last threads connecting me to my son's fray and snap. Marcus called an hour later, calmer than Derek but no less angry. "Is it true about Uncle Vincent?" "The charges. Yes, my involvement, also yes." "Mom, do you have any idea what this is going to do to us? To the family? People are going to think that I value truth over comfort, that I won't cover up murder to protect family reputation. Good. Let them think that. This isn't like you." I laughed without humor. "You have no idea what I'm like, Marcus. None. You've spent 35 years looking right through me." "That's not fair. Your brother tried to put me in assisted living. You agreed with him. Don't talk to me about fair." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, "What do you want from us?" "Nothing, not anymore. I wanted you to see me, to value me, to treat me with basic respect. But I'm done waiting for that. I'm 62 years old. I don't have time to keep hoping you'll become men I can be proud of. Mom, I have to go. The Pentagon is calling. It wasn't, but I couldn't keep having the same conversation. Couldn't keep explaining that doing the right thing mattered more than family loyalty when family loyalty meant protecting a monster. I turned off my phone, made lunch I didn't eat, stared at the walls that had witnessed 40 years of secrets and silence. Outside my window, November rain turned the world gray and clean, washing away the last traces of autumn, preparing the earth for winter's harsh truths. Inside, I sat with my choices and found I had no regrets. Not about Vincent, not even about Derek and Marcus, though their rejection carved hollow spaces in my chest that might never fill. I'd spent 4 decades being invisible, being the woman everyone overlooked because I had the audacity to value languages over violence, understanding over authority, truth over comfortable lies. Maybe it was time to let them see exactly what they'd been missing. The storm was just beginning, but I'd weathered worse. I'd built empires in secret. I'd exposed war criminals. I'd survived being invisible in my own family. I'd survive this too, and when it was over, I'd still be standing, still speaking 7 languages, still worth $80 million that nobody could see coming. Still Margaret Rousseau, still here, still unbreakable. The rain kept falling. I kept breathing. And somewhere in the Pentagon, the wheels of justice began their slow, inexorable turn. December arrived with the kind of cold that seeped into bones and refused to leave. I stood at my kitchen window watching ice crystals form on bare branches, my coffee growing cold in my hands. 3 days since Vincent's arrest. 3 days of silence from my sons punctuated by increasingly desperate voicemails I refused to answer. General Morrison's folder sat on my dining table like an unexploded ordnance. Inside, every document told the same story in different languages. Financial transfers disguised as consulting fees. Email chains where Vincent discussed local interpreters the way other men discussed livestock. After-action reports edited so heavily they bore no resemblance to what actually happened in the field. My doorbell rang at 8 in the morning, too early for anyone with good intentions. Through the peephole, I saw Yasmin Al-Farsi, her silver hair pulled back in its customary bun, holding 2 cups from the coffee shop 3 blocks over. "I know you're home, Maggie. Your car's in the driveway and the lights have been on since 5. I opened the door. Yasmin swept in with the kind of authority that came from 40 years of commanding college classrooms, set both cups on my counter, and fixed me with a look that had made graduate students confess to plagiarism. "You look terrible. Good morning to you, too. When did you last eat something that wasn't tea and regret?" I couldn't actually remember. Saturday, maybe. I'm fine. Yasmin opened my refrigerator, made a disapproving sound at the half-empty shelves, and pulled out eggs that were probably still good. "You're not fine. You're a woman who just destroyed her family's golden idol and you're sitting alone in a house that echoes with ghosts. That's the opposite of fine." She cracked eggs into a pan with practiced efficiency. The smell made my stomach clench with unexpected hunger. I hadn't realized how empty I was until someone forced me to acknowledge it. "The Pentagon called again yesterday. They want me to come in Friday for a full deposition, on the record, under oath." "And you're going to do it?" Not a question. Yasmin knew me too well. I have to. Those families deserve answers. Layla deserves to know her father didn't die because he made a mistake. "Your sons won't forgive you." "They already don't forgive me. At least this way I'll have earned their anger." Yasmin slid scrambled eggs onto a plate, added toast from bread I didn't remember buying, and sat across from me with the expectation that I'd eat. I did, mechanically at first, then with genuine appetite that surprised us both. Derek called me. She let the words hang in the air like smoke. Yesterday afternoon. Wanted to know if I could talk sense into you. My fork stilled. What did you tell him? That you're the most sensible person I know. That sense sometimes looks like cruelty to people who have been living in comfortable lies. She sipped her coffee, eyes never leaving my face. He doesn't understand why you do this. He kept saying Vincent was family, like that word is supposed to trump everything else. Vincent let 23 people die for money. Family doesn't excuse that. I know that. You know that. But Derek spent 38 years believing the world works differently. That power protects itself. That loyalty flows upward to the strong. That women like his mother exist to smooth rough edges and keep secrets. Yasmin's mouth twisted. You just detonated every assumption he's built his life on. The eggs tasted like ash suddenly. I pushed the plate away. I didn't do this to hurt them. No, you did it because it was right. But Maggie, being right doesn't mean being safe. Your brother has resources, connections, a reputation that spans 4 decades. He's going to fight this with everything he has. Let him fight. I have evidence. Evidence can be discredited. Witnesses can be intimidated. Your brother knows how this game is played. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, but the message made my blood run cold. Mom, it's Marcus. New phone. Please don't block this one. Uncle Vincent says you're being manipulated by people who want to hurt him. Says he has proof you fabricated evidence. I don't know what to believe anymore, but I need to hear your side. Please. I showed Yasmin the message. Her eyebrows rose. So it begins, the counterattack. He can't prove I fabricated anything. Every document came from official sources. Doesn't matter if it's true. Matters if people believe it. Vincent's already planting doubt in your sons' minds, making them question your mental state, your motivations, whether you're being used by his enemies. I stood, paced to the window. Outside, a neighbor walked their dog in the weak December sunlight. Normal life continuing while mine unraveled in slow motion. What do you think I should do? Fight harder, fight smarter. And for God's sake, stop isolating yourself. You have people who love you. Let us help. The word love sat uncomfortably in my chest. Love felt like something I'd forfeited when I chose truth over family loyalty. But Yasmin was here, making breakfast, calling out my self-destruction with the bluntness only real friends could manage. I have the Pentagon deposition Friday. Good, I'm driving you. And afterward, you're coming to my place for dinner. Grace Thompson is flying in from San Diego. She wants to talk strategy. Colonel Grace Thompson, my former colleague, now the CEO I'd hired to run Crescent Solutions' day-to-day operations. Sharp as broken glass and twice as dangerous when protecting people she cared about. If Grace was getting involved, things were about to get serious. The week crawled forward with the momentum of continental drift. Wednesday brought a certified letter from Vincent's attorney, threatening defamation charges if I continued, spreading malicious falsehoods about a decorated veteran. I filed it with the others. Thursday brought a call from Derek's divorce attorney. Apparently, Amanda had decided a man whose mother was embroiled in a military scandal wasn't the meal ticket she'd signed up for. I felt a shameful flicker of satisfaction at that news. Friday morning arrived wrapped in fog that refused to burn off. Yasmin collected me at 7, drove through traffic that was mercifully light, and deposited me at the Pentagon visitor entrance with a squeeze of my hand and a whispered reminder to breathe. General Morrison's office had been transformed into something resembling a war room. 3 JAG Corps attorneys sat around the conference table, surrounded by documents that could have wallpapered my entire townhouse. Morrison herself stood at a whiteboard covered in names, dates, locations. A timeline of death spanning 6 years. Mrs. Rauso, thank you for coming. She gestured to an empty chair. I believe you know Colonel Reynolds and Captain Martinez from JAG. This is Major Chen, no relation to your brother, who's been leading the forensic accounting investigation. Major Chen was a compact woman in her 40s with eyes that probably saw straight through to classified bank accounts. She nodded at me with the kind of respect that felt unearned. Before we begin the formal deposition, I wanted to brief you on what we found since the arrest. Morrison pulled up a presentation on the screen behind her. Your initial evidence provided the foundation, but once we had probable cause, we could access materials that were previously restricted. The first slide showed financial transfers, millions of dollars flowing from Vanguard Linguistics through a web of shell corporations, eventually landing in accounts tied to Vincent. The second slide showed email communications recovered from servers Vincent thought had been wiped clean. The third showed casualty reports, official versions, and the deleted originals that told very different stories. My hands gripped the armrests hard enough to leave marks. Seeing it all laid out like this, the systematic nature of the corruption, the casual cruelty in Vincent's emails discussing acceptable losses and asset expendability, made something cold and sharp settle in my chest. We've identified 15 operations where Vanguard interpreters were used despite known security risks. Morrison's voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen too much death in her career. 23 fatalities directly attributable to compromised intelligence or deliberate misdirection. Your brother approved all 15 operations. He received payments totaling $3.7 million from Vanguard between 2010 and 2016. $3.7 million, more than I'd initially calculated. Blood money stacked so high it could buy mansions and reputations, and the silence of everyone who might have questioned. Captain Martinez, young enough to be my daughter, leaned forward. Mrs. Rouse, we need to establish your timeline of discovery. When did you first suspect your brother's involvement? I gathered my thoughts, reached for the clarity that had sustained me through deployments and interrogations. April 2023. One of my employees, Layla Hassan, mentioned inconsistencies in her father's death report. I pulled the file as a favor to her, expecting to find bureaucratic errors. Instead, I found deletions, alterations, things that didn't match witness statements. And you pursued this why? Because Rashid Hassan worked for a company that competed with mine. If there were systemic failures in interpreter vetting, I needed to know. For my client's safety and for my business integrity. It was true, if incomplete. I'd also pursued it because Layla reminded me of myself at 28. Brilliant, underestimated, certain that if she just worked hard enough, people would see her value. I'd wanted to help her the way no one had helped me. When did you realize your brother was involved? June 2023. I cross-referenced the operations where Vanguard interpreters died with command authorizations. Vincent's signature appeared on 12 of 15. That could have been coincidence, but then I found the financial records. Major Chen pulled out a binder thick enough to stop bullets. Can you walk us through how you obtained these financial records? We need to establish chain of custody. For the next 3 hours, they questioned every detail. How I'd accessed databases, which sources I'd cultivated, what techniques I'd used to verify authenticity of documents. The attorneys took notes in silence, occasionally exchanging glances that suggested they were building something bigger than a simple court-martial case. Around noon, Morrison called a break. I stood on shaking legs, accepted coffee I didn't want, and tried not to think about what Vincent would do when he learned the full extent of evidence stacked against him. Colonel Reynolds joined me by the window. He was older than the others, gray-haired and weathered, with the look of someone who'd prosecuted 100 cases and lost sleep over every one. You know this is going to trial, don't you? Your brother will refuse to plead. He'll make this as public and painful as possible. I know. Your sons will be called. Your brother's attorneys will paint you as a vindictive sister who fabricated evidence out of professional jealousy. They'll drag your company through the mud, question your mental competence, imply you're being manipulated by foreign interests. I know that too. And you're still willing to testify. I met his gaze directly. Those 23 people don't have the option to testify. Someone has to speak for them. If that someone is me, so be it. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition of someone who'd counted the cost and paid it anyway. For what it's worth, Mrs. Rouso, the Judge Advocate General's office doesn't take cases we can't win. We have him. Your testimony just seals it. The deposition resumed. They walked me through every document, every communication, every piece of evidence I'd turned over. By 4 in the afternoon, my voice was hoarse and my hands trembled from too much coffee and not enough food. Finally, Morrison closed her binder. Thank you, Mrs. Rouso. This has been incredibly helpful. We'll need you available for the trial, which will likely begin in March. Expect to be on the stand for several days. Several days. Of Vincent's attorneys trying to destroy me. Of my sons watching from the gallery, choosing sides, learning exactly how far I'd go to do what I believed was right. Yasmin was waiting in the lobby with Grace Thompson. Grace looked exactly as I remembered, tall and angular with close-cropped hair and a smile that could cut glass. She pulled me into a hug that smelled like expensive cologne and jet fuel. You look like hell, boss. Everyone keeps saying that. I'm starting to think it might be true. Good, means you're taking this seriously. Grace guided me toward the exit with a hand on my elbow. Yasmin filled me in. Your brother's attorneys are already making noise. We need to talk strategy. We ended up at Yasmin's townhouse in Georgetown, the one she'd bought back when professors could still afford that neighborhood. Her living room was warm and cluttered with books in 3 languages, comfortable in a way my sparse space could never manage. Grace opened her laptop, pulled up files I recognized as Crescent Solutions' internal documents. Your brother's team is going to argue that you had financial motive. That Vanguard was competition, and you used the investigation to eliminate a business rival. That's insane. Vanguard was barely competition. They undercut on price because they didn't vet properly. Doesn't matter if it's insane, matters if it's plausible. Grace's fingers flew across the keyboard. So we make it implausible. I've prepared a full accounting of Crescent's finances for the past decade. Shows that Vanguard's contracts had 0 impact on our bottom line. We actually grew market share while they operated because we had better safety records. Yasmin set tea in front of each of us, mint and honey that soothed my raw throat. What about the sons? Have they been in contact? Marcus texted. Derek's been silent since Monday. They're going to testify, Grace said bluntly. Vincent's attorneys will call them as character witnesses. They'll say you were always jealous of your brother, that you resented his success, that this is revenge for childhood slights. The words landed like body blows. My own sons, standing in a courtroom, telling strangers that their mother was petty and vindictive and mentally unstable. It shouldn't hurt. I'd known this was coming. But knowing and experiencing remained different creatures. Let them, my voice came out harder than intended. Let them say whatever Vincent's coached them to say. The evidence speaks for itself. Maggie, Yasmin's hand covered mine. You're allowed to grieve this. You're allowed to be hurt that they're choosing him over you. I'm also allowed to be angry. I spent 40 years supporting them, protecting them, building wealth they didn't know existed so they'd be secure. And when it mattered, when I needed them to believe in me just once, they sided with a war criminal because he wore his power on his sleeve. Grace closed her laptop. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Those interpreters were people. They had families. They deserved better than to be used as bait and then erased from the record. One of them was Layla's father. I know. She's been asking about you. Wants to know if there's anything she can do to help. The thought of Layla, barely 30 years old, caught in the crossfire of my family's implosion made something twist in my chest. Keep her away from this. She doesn't need to be dragged into our dysfunction. Too late for that. She's scheduled to give a victim impact statement at the trial. She wants to. Says her father deserves to have someone speak for him who actually knew him as a person, not just a line item on a casualty report. I closed my eyes. 28 years old and already braver than I'd been at 40. Does she understand what Vincent's attorneys will do to her? They'll question everything. Imply her father was incompetent, that he made mistakes that got himself killed. She understands. She's doing it anyway. Grace's smile was knife-sharp. Wonder where she learned that kind of courage. We sat in comfortable silence, 3 women who'd survived in worlds that didn't want us. Yasmin with her academic battles against department chairs, who thought women couldn't understand Middle Eastern politics. Grace with her military career, navigating men who resented taking orders from female officers. Me with my invisible empire built while everyone assumed I was just a retired housewife playing at business. My phone buzzed. Text from Marcus, his 3rd this week. Mom, please. Uncle Vincent is family. Can we at least talk about this before the trial? I don't understand why you're doing this. What did he do that was so bad it's worth destroying everything? I stared at the message for a long moment. What did he do that was so bad? The question revealed everything wrong with how I'd raised my sons. They could intellectually acknowledge that people died, but they couldn't connect that abstraction to actual human cost. Couldn't understand that 23 deaths weren't just statistics, but fathers and brothers and sons who went to work one day and never came home. You want me to respond? Yasmin was reading over my shoulder. No, yes, I don't know. I set the phone face down on the coffee table. What do I even say? How do I explain that some things matter more than family loyalty? You tell him the truth. That you love him, but you love justice more. That you hope someday he'll understand, but you're not waiting for his permission to do what's right. The words crystallized something that had been forming since Thanksgiving dinner. I picked up my phone, typed carefully. Marcus, I'm doing this because 23 people died. They had families too. They deserved better than to be used and discarded. I understand you don't agree with my choice. But it's made, and I'm at peace with it. I love you. That hasn't changed. But I won't apologize for seeking justice. His response came within seconds. You're going to regret this. We all are. Maybe, probably, but regret felt cleaner than complicity. December bled into January through a haze of legal preparations and media attention I hadn't anticipated. The story broke nationally 3 days before Christmas. Decorated general charged with war crimes ran on every major news outlet. By New Year's, reporters were camped outside my townhouse, shouting questions through my front window about my relationship with Vincent, about Crescent Solutions, about whether I felt guilty destroying my family. I stopped answering the door, started parking in the garage behind my house, ordered groceries for delivery and worked from home, managing Crescent's operations through encrypted video calls with Grace. Vincent's arraignment happened the 2nd week of January. I didn't attend, but I watched the coverage on 3 different news channels. He walked into the courthouse in full dress uniform, every medal he'd ever earned glittering on his chest. Playing the hero card, letting the cameras capture him as the decorated veteran being persecuted by vindictive civilians. The media ate it up. Half the coverage painted him as a patriot being destroyed by political correctness. The other half suggested there was no smoke without fire, that investigations like this didn't happen without substantial evidence. My sons appeared in several photographs, standing behind Vincent on the courthouse steps. Derek in an expensive suit that probably cost more than the lawyer fees. Marcus looking uncomfortable but present, united in support of the man they thought they knew. I turned off the television, sat in silence that felt heavier than any noise. The doorbell rang at 8 p.m., too late for delivery drivers or neighbors making friendly visits. I checked the peephole and saw Vincent. My brother stood on my doorstep in civilian clothes, no uniform, no medals. Just a 68-year-old man who looked older than his years, gray hair catching the porch light, face lined with anger and something that might have been fear. I opened the door, didn't invite him in. You shouldn't be here. Your attorneys would have a heart attack. Fuck my attorneys. Vincent's voice carried that command tone that had directed battalions. We need to talk, sister to brother. We haven't been sister and brother since I was 16, and you told our parents my college scholarship was a waste of tuition money. He flinched, actually flinched. I'd forgotten he could be vulnerable, that beneath the medals and reputation was someone who'd once been young and uncertain. Let me in, Margaret, please. The please did it, not because it softened me, but because it revealed how desperate he'd become. I stepped aside. He entered my home for the first time in 8 years, looked around at my modest furniture and well-worn carpets with barely concealed disdain. You live like this, with all your money. I live like someone who knows the difference between wealth and worth. He prowled my living room like a caged animal, touching things without really seeing them. The photo of David and me on our wedding day. The books in 7 languages. The small bronze sculpture Yasmin had brought me from Iraq. You have to stop this. Withdraw your testimony. Tell them you were mistaken, that you misinterpreted the evidence. I wasn't mistaken. Margaret, listen to me. You don't understand what you're doing. This trial will destroy more than just me. It'll destroy the boys. Derek's already lost his wife. Marcus is being investigated by his company's ethics board. Their names are being dragged through mud because their mother decided to play hero. Their names are attached to yours. I didn't create that problem. You did. Vincent spun to face me, all pretense of civility dropping away. I served this country for 40 years. I bled for it. I made decisions in the field that armchair quarterbacks like you could never understand. You let people die for money. Don't dress it up as service. Those interpreters knew the risks. They signed contracts that explicitly stated. They were lied to. You promised them safety and used them as bait. Rashid Hassan thought he was helping with intelligence gathering. Instead, you fed him false information designed to draw out a high-value target, knowing there was a 70% chance the operation was compromised. How do you know the probability assessment? Because I found the actual operational planning documents, the ones you deleted from official servers. You knew it was compromised, and you sent him anyway. Vincent's face went through several colors, red to white to an ugly mottled purple. I did what I had to do to get results. Sometimes in war, people die. That's the reality you never had the stomach for. No, in war, soldiers die knowing what they signed up for. Those interpreters died thinking they were protected. That's not war. That's murder. His hand slammed down on my bookshelf hard enough to rattle picture frames. You self-righteous bitch. You've spent your whole life playing with languages while real soldiers did real work. And now you're destroying me because you're jealous that I actually mattered. The words should have hurt. Would have hurt, maybe, if I hadn't already heard variations from my sons, from Amanda, from reporters who implied I was motivated by sibling rivalry rather than justice. You mattered so much that you sold out the people who trusted you. You mattered so much that you took blood money and bought yourself a retirement villa. You mattered so much that 23 families will never see their loved ones again. They were collateral damage. They were people. The shout surprised both of us. I rarely raised my voice, preferred strategic silence to emotional outbursts. But something in Vincent's casual dismissal of human life snapped the last thread of restraint I'd been maintaining. They were fathers and sons and brothers. Rashid Hassan had 3 children. Jamal Ahmadi was 19 years old. Fatima Kazmi was the only woman interpreter in her province, and she worked with us because she believed in women's education. They weren't collateral damage. They were people you sacrificed for profit. Vincent's laugh was bitter and ugly. And you're what? Their savior. You think turning me in makes you noble. It makes you a traitor. To your family, to your brother, to everything we were raised to value. We were raised to value the wrong things. Power over integrity. Success over honor. Family loyalty over basic human decency. I moved toward the door, opened it. I'm done with this conversation. You should leave. The boys will never forgive you. They might not, but they're not children anymore. They're men who get to choose what kind of people they want to be. Right now they're choosing to protect a war criminal. I hope someday they choose differently. Vincent walked to the door, stopped in the threshold. For a moment he looked less like a decorated general and more like an old man facing consequences he'd never imagined could catch him. I vouched for you. When you wanted that army commission, when Dad thought you should just get married and settle down, I told him you deserved a chance. This is how you repay me. You vouched for me because it made you look magnanimous, because having a sister in military intelligence gave you access to resources you could exploit. You didn't do it out of love or faith in me. You did it because I was useful. That's not true. Isn't it? When's the last time we talked when you didn't want something? When's the last time you called to ask how I was doing, not to pump me for information or contacts or favors? He had no answer for that. We both knew the truth. Our relationship had been transactional for decades, me providing value and him collecting credit. The only difference was that now I'd stopped pretending it was anything else. I was wrong about you. His voice dropped to something almost sad. I thought you were weak. Turns out you're just ruthless. No, I'm just done being invisible. I closed the door on his retreating form, locked it, and stood in my entryway until my legs remembered how to hold weight. The confrontation had taken something from me, carved out spaces I wasn't sure would ever refill. My phone rang. Grace's number. Tell me you didn't let him in. How did you know he was here? Because I had someone watching your house. Maggie, you can't have private conversations with him. His attorneys will claim you tried to coerce him into taking a plea deal. I didn't try to coerce anything. I just told him the truth. The truth isn't a defense in court. Promise me you won't see him again without an attorney present. I promised. Hung up. Poured scotch I rarely drank and sat in darkness that felt safer than light. The trial date was set for March 15th. 2 months away. 2 months of watching my family fracture along fault lines I'd created by refusing to stay silent. January crawled toward February. The media storm intensified after someone leaked portions of the evidence to investigative journalists. Detailed accounting of Vincent's payments from Vanguard. Email chains where he discussed asset management in terms that made human beings sound like equipment. Casualty reports with alterations highlighted in red. Public opinion began shifting. The initial decorated veteran being persecuted narrative gave way to questions about accountability, about contractor oversight, about whether the military had failed to protect the very people it recruited to help. Derek called on February 1st. Not Marcus. Derek, the son who'd wanted to put me in assisted living. Mom, his voice sounded like he'd been crying. Can we meet? Please, I need to talk to you. Every instinct screamed trap, but maternal hope was a stubborn thing, surviving on scraps long after logic said to let it die. Where? Your place, or neutral ground if you prefer. I'll come alone. No Amanda, no attorneys, no Uncle Vincent. We met at a coffee shop equidistant from both our homes. He arrived early, I noticed through the window, sat in a corner booth looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen him. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by jeans and a sweater that had seen better days. I slid into the seat across from him, ordered nothing, waited. I hired a private investigator. The words tumbled out like he'd been holding them too long. To look into Uncle Vincent, I needed to know if what you were saying was true. My heart did something complicated, and he found everything. The payments, the emails, the documents. Mom, I saw the operation planning file for Rashid Hassan's mission. 70% probability of compromise. Vincent sent him anyway. Derek's hands shook around his coffee cup. I saw the email where Vincent told Vanguard's CEO not to worry about vetting, that he'd handle any complaints. Why did you investigate? You seemed certain I was lying. Because Amanda left me, and in the divorce proceedings, her attorneys pulled my financial records. They found all the money I thought came from Uncle Vincent. It came from you, every dollar. College, apartment, wedding, the trust fund, all you. Understanding crashed over me. He hadn't investigated Vincent out of doubt. He'd investigated me out of greed, trying to prove he deserved the money I'd given him, and instead found proof of Vincent's guilt. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about the financial support. Don't, he held up a hand. Don't apologize. I don't deserve apologies. I called you a burden. I tried to put you in a nursing home. I stood with him at the courthouse knowing you were right, and I still chose him because he made me feel important, and you just made me feel seen, really seen, and I hated that. The honesty was unexpected, raw, the kind of truth that costs something to speak. What do you want from me, Derek? Permission to testify for the prosecution. I want to tell the court about the financial investigation, about what I found. I want. His voice cracked. I want to help you. I know I don't deserve to, but I want to try. Vincent's attorneys will destroy you. They'll say you're testifying out of greed, trying to secure your inheritance by siding with me. Let them. You've been willing to lose everything for truth. Maybe it's time I learned how that works. We sat in silence. Around us, ordinary people lived ordinary lives. Students studying for exams, couples on dates, parents with small children, all of them blissfully unaware that in this corner booth, a family was trying to reassemble itself from broken pieces. I can't promise forgiveness. The words felt necessary. Not yet, maybe not ever. I know. But I can promise honesty. I'm doing this because those people mattered. Because justice matters more than family loyalty when family loyalty means covering up murder. Derek nodded, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand in a gesture that reminded me painfully of the little boy he'd been before the world taught him to value power over humanity. Marcus isn't ready yet. He still thinks Uncle Vincent can be saved. That if we just find the right attorneys, the right narrative, everything will be fine. Marcus was always better at denial. Yeah, he was. Derek stood, hesitated, then reached across the table to squeeze my hand. Thank you for not giving up on us even when we gave up on you. I watched him leave through the coffee shop window. My son. Changed, maybe. Or maybe just finally showing me who he'd been capable of becoming all along if I'd pushed harder, demanded more, refused to make myself small to accommodate their comfort. February brought sleet and freezing rain that turned the world into a skating rink. It brought jury selection for Vincent's trial. It brought Marcus's engagement announcement, his new fiancée carefully chosen to be as far from family drama as possible. It brought Layla Hassan to my door on a Tuesday evening, her dark eyes red from crying, her hands clutching a folder I recognized as her father's service record. "Mrs. Rousseau, I need to show you something." We sat at my kitchen table, the same one where David and I had made plans and raised children and dreamed about futures that never quite materialized the way we'd hoped. Layla spread photographs across the scarred wood. Her father as a young man, smiling in traditional Afghan clothing. Her father with American soldiers, pointing at maps. Her father holding a newborn Layla, pride and love captured in fading ink. My whole life, I thought he died a hero, that he gave his life helping American forces. When you told me the truth, that he was used as bait, I didn't want to believe it. She touched one photograph with trembling fingers. But I pulled his personnel file. I found the operation brief. I saw what General Chen did. "I'm sorry you had to learn this way." "Don't be sorry, be proud." Layla met my eyes with the kind of fierce determination I recognized from my own mirror. "You gave my father his honor back. The official record called him a casualty of Taliban aggression. Now the real record will show he was a casualty of American greed. That's not the same, but it's truth. Truth matters." "The trial is going to be brutal. Vincent's attorneys will question your father's competence, his loyalty, everything." "Let them. I'll stand up there and tell them exactly who Rashid Hassan was. A man who believed in education, in peace, in helping build a better future. A man who trusted the wrong general." She gathered the photographs, slid them back into her folder. "I'm not afraid of their questions. I'm afraid of staying silent." After she left, I sat holding the image of Rashid Hassan that she'd left behind. 45 years old, 3 languages, dead because my brother valued profit over people. The trial loomed like a thunderhead on the horizon. March 15th, 3 weeks away. Vincent had assembled a legal team that cost more than most people's houses. They'd already filed motions to dismiss, motions to suppress evidence, motions claiming everything from improper search and seizure to prosecutorial misconduct. All denied. The evidence was too solid, the case too clear. Grace called on March 1st. "The prosecution wants to meet with you. Final prep before trial. Their concerned Vincent's team is going to go after your mental competence. Claim you're experiencing age-related cognitive decline that makes your testimony unreliable." "I'm 62, not senile." "Doesn't matter. They'll bring in experts who'll testify that women your age experience hormonal changes that affect judgment. It's bullshit, but it'll play to a certain demographic." "So what do we do?" "We prove you're sharper than their entire legal team combined. Comprehensive cognitive testing, independent psychiatric evaluation, make them look like the sexist dinosaurs they are." I spent the next week being poked and prodded by doctors who tested everything from my reaction time to my ability to recall strings of numbers in 7 different languages. The psychologist who evaluated my mental state seemed bemused by the whole exercise. "Mrs. Rousseau, you're in the 98th percentile for your age group across all cognitive measures. You speak 7 languages fluently. You run a multi-million-dollar company. Anyone who questions your competence is either ignorant or arguing in bad faith." Her report became part of the prosecution's evidence, another brick in the wall I was building around truth. March 10th brought the last pretrial conference. I sat in a courthouse conference room, surrounded by attorneys who treated me with the careful respect usually reserved for unexploded ordnance. Vincent sat across from me, separated by 20 feet and the width of justice. We didn't speak, didn't acknowledge each other, but I felt his rage like heat from a furnace, saw it in the rigid set of his shoulders, the way his hands clenched and unclenched on the table. Judge Advocate Captain Helena Vasquez presided over the conference with the efficiency of someone who'd seen every legal tactic and was unimpressed by all of them. She denied 3 more motions from Vincent's team, set strict parameters for witness examination, and made it clear she wouldn't tolerate theatrics. This trial concerns 23 deaths and allegations of systemic corruption. I expect all parties to treat it with appropriate gravity. We begin Monday, March 15th. Opening statements at 0900 hours. Monday, March 15th, 5 days away. I drove home through rush hour traffic, my hands steady on the wheel despite the tremors that wanted to take over. At a red light, I checked my phone and found a text from Marcus. "Mom, I'm sorry. I can't testify for you. Uncle Vincent is family. I hope someday you understand." Below it, a text from Derek. "I'll be there Monday. Front row, whatever you need." One son lost, one found. The mathematics of family reduced to simple addition and subtraction. The weekend before the trial, Yasmin and Grace staged an intervention disguised as a dinner party. They appeared at my door Saturday evening with enough food for a small army and the determination to make sure I didn't spend the weekend spiraling into anxiety. We ate lamb tagine that Yasmin had spent hours perfecting, drank wine that Grace had brought from her personal collection, talked about everything except the trial until finally I couldn't stand the careful avoidance anymore. "Just say it, you're both thinking it." Yasmin and Grace exchanged glances. Grace folded her napkin with precise movements. "We're worried you're going to go into that courtroom and be too nice, too measured, too willing to see your brother's perspective. After everything he's done. After a lifetime of being told to be quiet, to not make waves, to let men be important while you stayed invisible." Yasmin's voice was gentle but firm. "Maggie, you've spent 62 years making yourself smaller so others could feel bigger. Monday, you need to take up all the space you deserve." "I don't know how to do that." "Yes, you do. You built an $80 million company in secret. You exposed war crimes knowing it would cost you your family. You're doing it right now." Grace leaned forward. "But when you're on that stand, when Vincent's attorneys try to make you doubt yourself, you need to remember, you're not the girl who got ignored at Thanksgiving dinner. You're not the woman who let her sons call her a burden. You're Margaret fucking Rousseau, and you have every right to that courtroom." The words settled into my bones like armor. Margaret fucking Rousseau. Not Chen. Not someone's sister or mother or widow. My own person, carrying my own name, claiming my own truth. Sunday I spent alone, by choice. Walked through the National Gallery looking at paintings David and I had loved. Stood in front of a Monet we'd discovered together, remembering how he'd said the Impressionists understood that truth was about perception, about the courage to see things differently than everyone else. My phone buzzed, text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Rousseau, this is Layla Hassan. Tomorrow changes everything. Thank you for having the courage to start it. My father would be proud." I saved the message. Read it 3 more times. Let it remind me why I was doing this when the easier path would have been silence. Monday morning arrived clear and cold. I dressed in my most severe suit, navy blue that David had always said made me look like I could command armies. Pinned on the simple pearl earrings he'd given me. Applied makeup with a hand that barely shook. Derek texted at 7. "Leaving now, see you there." Yasmin and Grace collected me at 8. We drove to the courthouse in silence, each woman locked in her own thoughts. The parking lot was already filling with news vans and reporters. Security had been tripled for the trial. This was news now, national news. "Ready," Grace's hand on my shoulder. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." We walked through a gauntlet of cameras, reporters shouting questions I didn't answer. Inside, the courthouse was blessedly quiet. marble floors and high ceilings that made whispers echo. Derek waited by the courtroom entrance. He looked older than 38, like the past months had aged him in ways that had nothing to do with time. We nodded at each other. Not reconciliation, not yet, but acknowledgement. The courtroom filled. I saw faces I recognized. General Morrison, Colonel Reynolds, Layla Hassan sitting with her mother, both women dressed in black like mourners, which I supposed they were. And there, in the defendant's section, Vincent, full dress uniform despite regulations that should have prevented it. Every medal, every ribbon, every symbol of 40 years of service displayed like armor against truth. Our eyes met across the courtroom. His were flat, cold, the eyes of someone who decided I was an enemy rather than a sister. Mine, I hoped, were clear, certain, unbreakable. Judge Vasquez entered. We all stood. Be seated. United States versus General Vincent Chen, case number MC 2024-8847. Opening statements. Prosecution, you may begin. Colonel Reynolds stood, every inch the career prosecutor who'd sent countless defendants to military prison. His voice carried to every corner of the courtroom. Your Honor, over the next weeks, the prosecution will prove that General Vincent Chen engaged in a systematic pattern of corruption spanning 6 years, that he accepted $3.7 million in payments from a defense contractor that provided substandard services, that he approved 15 operations using interpreters he knew to be security risks, that 23 people died as a direct result of his decisions, and that he attempted to cover up these deaths by altering official records and intimidating witnesses. Reynolds pulled up the first exhibit, Rashid Hassan's photograph, young, smiling, alive. This is Rashid Hassan. He was 45 years old, father of 3. He spoke 4 languages and worked as an interpreter for American forces in Kandahar province. In June 2013, he was sent on an operation that General Chen knew had a 70% probability of compromise. Rashid Hassan died in the resulting ambush. His body was never recovered. His family was told he died a hero. The truth is, he died because General Chen valued profit over people. Reynolds continued through all 23 names, all 23 faces. The courtroom was silent except for his voice and the occasional sob from the gallery where families sat holding photographs of the dead. When he finished, Vincent's lead attorney stood. Marcus Powell, 60 years old, silver-haired, known for getting generals acquitted of everything from fraud to sexual assault. His opening painted Vincent as a hero betrayed by a vindictive sister, nursing decades of jealousy. He called me mentally unstable, suggested I'd fabricated evidence out of professional rivalry, implied that my testimony would be motivated by personal grudges rather than facts. The defense will show that Mrs. Rousseau's company benefited directly from General Chen's downfall, that she had financial motive, personal motive, and the technical capability to alter documents and create false evidence, that this prosecution is built on the word of a woman who spent 40 years hiding her wealth and lying to her own family about her business operations. It stung, hearing my life reduced to malicious deception, but I'd known it was coming, had armored myself against it. Judge Vasquez called lunch recess. The afternoon would bring the first witnesses, would bring, eventually, my testimony. In the hallway, Layla approached me. That attorney is a monster. He's doing his job, defending his client with everything he has. Doesn't make it less monstrous. She hesitated, then hugged me. Brief, fierce, the embrace of someone who understood what it cost to stand against power. You're not alone in this. I looked around the hallway. Derek standing with prosecutors, his face set with determination. Yasmin and Grace flanking me like bodyguards. Layla and her mother. Other families of the dead, people I'd never met who traveled across the country to witness justice. I wasn't alone. I'd built my own family from people who saw me, valued me, stood with me when blood relatives fell away. The afternoon brought forensic accountants who walked the jury through Vincent's finances, showed the payments in excruciating detail, demonstrated how he'd hidden money through shell corporations and offshore accounts that should have been impossible for anyone without sophisticated financial knowledge to trace. But I'd had sophisticated financial knowledge, and I'd traced every dollar. Day one ended at 1700 hours. I drove home exhausted, drained by the weight of testimony I hadn't even given yet. Tomorrow would bring military witnesses. Day after that, intelligence analysts. Then me. My phone buzzed as I pulled into my driveway. Marcus. I watched the news coverage. I don't know what to think anymore. I don't know who to believe. I typed back carefully. Believe the evidence. Believe the families of the dead. Believe that some things matter more than family loyalty. No response. I hadn't expected one. Tuesday brought more testimony. Wednesday brought the operation planning documents, displayed on screens large enough that every person in that courtroom could see Vincent's signature approving missions he knew were compromised. Thursday morning, Colonel Reynolds called me to the stand. I walked through a silent courtroom, placed my hand on a Bible I didn't believe in, swore to tell the truth I'd already decided was worth more than comfort. Please state your name for the record. Margaret Elizabeth Rousseau. And your relationship to the defendant. He's my brother. Reynolds walked me through my background, my education, my military service, my company, establishing credibility, showing the jury I was competent, reliable, expert in the field that had exposed Vincent's crimes. Then the hard questions began. How I'd obtained evidence, what had motivated me to investigate, whether I stood to gain financially from Vincent's conviction. I answered each question with precision born from 40 years of parsing language for lies. No, I had no financial motive. Yes, I understood the gravity of my accusations. No, I wasn't motivated by family grudges, but by responsibility to people who couldn't speak for themselves. Marcus Powell's cross-examination was everything I'd expected and worse. He questioned my relationship with Vincent, implied I'd always been jealous of his success, suggested my secret business meant I was comfortable with deception, insinuated that my age and gender made me unreliable. Mrs. Rousseau, isn't it true that you built your company specifically to compete with Vanguard Linguistics? No. I built my company 30 years ago. Vanguard was founded in 2009. But you were aware of Vanguard's existence. I was aware of every major contractor in my field. That's good business practice. And you were aware that Vanguard had contracts your company wanted. Vanguard had contracts my company didn't need. We focused on quality over quantity. Our safety record speaks for itself. Powell pivoted, trying different angles, suggesting I'd manipulated evidence, implying my testimony was coached, questioning whether a woman my age could really manage the kind of investigation I claimed to have conducted. That last question lit something in me, not anger exactly, clarity. Mr. Powell, I speak 7 languages fluently. I've worked in military intelligence for 40 years. I hold a doctorate in linguistics from Georgetown University. I built and currently operate an $80 million company that has never had a single security incident. If you're suggesting that being 62 and female makes me incompetent, I'd invite you to compare our credentials. A ripple of laughter ran through the gallery. Judge Vasquez's gavel came down. Mrs. Rousseau, please just answer the questions asked. I apologize, Your Honor. But the damage was done. Powell had overplayed his hand, revealed his sexism too obviously. The jury saw it. I saw 3 women on the jury sit up straighter, their expressions shifting from neutral to engaged. The cross-examination continued for 3 more hours. Powell tried every tactic, but I'd prepared for this. Had spent weeks with prosecutors going over every possible question, every angle of attack. Finally, Judge Vasquez called it. "We'll resume tomorrow at 0900 hours. Mrs. Rouso, you're still under oath." I stepped down from the witness stand on shaking legs, made it to the hallway before the tremors really hit. Yasmin was there, Grace, Derek hovering uncertainly. "You were incredible." Grace's eyes were bright. "You destroyed him." I just told the truth. Same thing. We emerged from the courthouse to camera flashes and shouted questions. I kept my head down, let Grace and Yasmin shield me, made it to the car without saying anything quotable. That night, alone in my townhouse, I allowed myself to cry, not from sadness or regret, from release, from the weight of 40 years of silence finally lifting. My testimony continued Friday. Then Layla Hassan took the stand, spoke of her father with such love and pain that half the courtroom wept. Then Derek, explaining his financial investigation, admitting he'd stood with Vincent out of pride rather than evidence. The trial would continue for weeks, but the outcome felt inevitable now. The evidence was too overwhelming. The testimony too consistent. Vincent's attorneys kept fighting, but it was the fight of men who knew they'd already lost. Closing arguments came on March 28th. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Vincent's face, when the verdict was read, showed no emotion. He'd put on his general's mask and refused to take it off even as his world collapsed. Sentencing would come later. For now, he was remanded to military custody pending final judgment. I sat in that courtroom feeling nothing and everything. Relief, grief, vindication, loss, all of it tangled together in ways I'd spend years parsing. Outside, reporters shouted questions. I stopped on the courthouse steps, let the cameras capture me. "Do you have any regrets?" One question from the crowd, simple, direct. "I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret doing it. 23 people deserved justice. I'm glad I could help give it to them." That clip would play on every news network, would become part of my legacy. Margaret Rouso, the woman who chose truth over family. I could live with that. Derek drove me home. We didn't talk much. But when he dropped me at my door, he hugged me. Really hugged me, the way he hadn't since he was small and thought I could fix anything. "Thank you for not giving up. On justice, on me. I'm your mother. Giving up was never an option." He left. I entered my quiet house, sat in the living room where Vincent had threatened me, where I'd made my choice. My phone buzzed, text from Marcus. The verdict was just, "I'm sorry it took me so long to see that. Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time. One son found, another finding his way back. Maybe not today, maybe not for months, but finding his way. "When you're ready, I'll be here." Outside, spring was trying to break through winter's last grasp. New growth pushing up through old soil. Change inevitable as seasons. Inside, I poured scotch and raised my glass to the photo of David. "We did it, Justice, finally." The scotch burned going down. Tasted like victory and loss and truth all mixed together. Tasted like freedom. Sentencing came 3 weeks after the verdict, on a Thursday morning that felt too ordinary for what was about to happen. April 18th, 2025. I marked it on my calendar with nothing more dramatic than a blue pen, the same blue pen I used to mark dentist appointments and grocery delivery windows. The courtroom was fuller than it had been for the verdict. Families of the 23 dead filled the gallery, some holding photographs, others clutching prayer beads or rosaries or simply each other's hands. The media presence had tripled. This was the moment America wanted to see. A decorated general brought low, accountability in a system that rarely held its own accountable. Vincent entered in civilian clothes this time. His attorneys had finally convinced him that wearing the uniform while being sentenced for crimes committed in service was poor optics. He looked smaller without the medals. Just a 68-year-old man facing consequences he'd spent a lifetime believing would never catch him. Judge Vasquez reviewed the charges with the mechanical precision of someone who'd done this too many times. Fraud, conspiracy, negligent homicide times 23, each count carrying its own weight, its own years. Does the defendant wish to make a statement before sentencing? Vincent stood. For a moment I thought he might apologize, might acknowledge the families sitting behind me, might show some sliver of remorse. I served this country for 40 years. I made difficult decisions in impossible situations. History will judge whether I was a criminal or a patriot. This court has made its judgment. I accept it. Not an apology, not even close. Just more of the same self-justification he'd been spinning since the arrest. The families deserved better. The dead deserved better. Judge Vasquez's face revealed nothing. Vincent Chen, this court sentences you to 20 years confinement at the United States Disciplinary Barracks, Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Dishonorable discharge. Forfeiture of all pay and allowances. Forfeiture of retirement benefits. Additionally, you are ordered to pay $5 million in restitution to be distributed among the families of the deceased. 20 years. Vincent would be 88 when released if he lived that long. His pension gone. His legacy destroyed. Everything he'd built over 4 decades reduced to a prisoner number and a cell. He didn't flinch, didn't react at all, just nodded once, let the bailiffs escort him out. As he passed my row, his eyes found mine. Empty, not angry anymore, just hollow. I felt nothing watching him leave. Not satisfaction, not grief, just the quiet relief of completion. Outside, reporters mobbed the courthouse steps. I'd prepared a statement with Grace's help, something brief and dignified that wouldn't give Vincent's attorneys ammunition for appeals. Justice has been served. I hope this brings some measure of peace to the families who lost loved ones. They deserved truth. They deserved accountability. I'm grateful this court provided both. Questions erupted, but I was already moving. Grace and Yasmin running interference. Derek's hand on my elbow guiding me through the crowd. We ended up at Yasmin's house because mine had become a media circus. Satellite trucks parked on my street. Reporters knocking on neighbors' doors asking what kind of person I was, whether I seemed vindictive, if they'd ever suspected I was wealthy. You can't go home for a while. Grace was already on her phone, making arrangements. I'm booking you a suite at the Watergate, under an assumed name. Give this thing a week to die down. I can't hide in a hotel for a week. You can and you will. Maggie, you just became the most famous whistleblower in military history. Every news outlet wants an interview. Every talk show wants you on their couch. You need to control the narrative or it'll control you. Yasmin emerged from her kitchen with tea and sympathy. Grace is right. Take a week. Decompress. Figure out what you want your next chapter to look like. My next chapter. I was 62 years old. I just destroyed my brother's life and fractured my family. I ran a company worth $80 million that I barely thought about because Grace handled everything. What did the next chapter look like when you'd already written the climax? I have that Pentagon offer, the advisory position. Do you want it? Yasmin settled into the chair across from me. Or are you just looking for the next crusade to avoid dealing with the fallout from this one? The question hit harder than intended. Maybe because it was true. I'd been so focused on justice, on Vincent's trial, on proving that languages mattered and truth mattered and I mattered. I hadn't thought about what came after. I don't know what I want. Then take the week, figure it out. The Watergate suite was absurdly luxurious for someone who preferred 1,200 square foot townhouses, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Potomac, a bathroom larger than my kitchen, room service that cost more per meal than I usually spent in a week. I ordered wine I didn't drink and stared at the water flowing past. Constant, inevitable, wearing down everything in its path given enough time. My phone buzzed with messages I wasn't ready to answer. Derek checking that I was safe. Marcus asking if we could talk, his third attempt since the verdict. Layla Hassan thanking me again, inviting me to a memorial service her family was planning for Rashid. General Morrison requesting a meeting to discuss the advisory position. A literary agent offering representation if I wanted to write a memoir. 3 separate documentary producers wanting exclusive access to tell my story. Everyone wanted something. My time, my words, my validation that what I'd done was heroic rather than simply necessary. I turned off my phone, sat in silence that felt less comfortable than it should have. A week at the Watergate became 10 days. I ventured out only for walks along the river, wearing sunglasses and a hat that made me feel ridiculous, but kept reporters from recognizing me. I read books in languages other than English just to hear different voices in my head. I slept too much and ate too little and generally behaved like someone recovering from surgery. Which, in a way, I was. I'd cut out a malignant piece of my life, and now I was healing around the absence. On day 11, Derek showed up at my door with takeout from the Thai place I'd mentioned liking 30 years ago. That he remembered touched something I'd thought was too scarred to feel. Grace told me where you were. I promised not to bring reporters or drama. I let him in. We ate pad thai in silence for a while, the kind of comfortable quiet that only comes with family or very old friends. Amanda finalized the divorce last week. Took half of everything I thought was mine, which turned out to be less than I thought since most of it came from you in the first place. I'm sorry. Don't be, she did me a favor, showed me who I'd become. He set down his fork, met my eyes. I want to work for Crescent Solutions, not as your son, as an employee. Grace said there's an opening in the interpreter support division. That's entry-level work. You're an investment banker. I was an investment banker who valued money over people. I'm trying to become someone who values people over money. That starts with entry-level work learning what actually matters. The sincerity in his voice was new, raw, the kind of honesty that cost something. If I approve this, you report to Layla Hassan. She runs that division. You'll be vetting interpreters, processing applications, conducting background checks. It's tedious work that pays $60,000 a year. I know. Grace already told me. I'm prepared to earn my way back to being someone you're proud of. Derek, I've always been proud of you. Disappointed sometimes, hurt often, but proud of your potential. The question is whether you're proud of yourself. He looked away, out the window where the Potomac flowed past, carrying debris and possibility in equal measure. I'm trying to be. That's why I'm asking for this. I approved it, called Grace the next morning, and told her to hire Derek with the understanding that family relationship bought him nothing but higher expectations. By mid-May, the media storm had calmed enough that I could go home. The neighbors had stopped selling interviews. I could walk to the corner store without cameras following. I called General Morrison, accepted the Pentagon advisory position. 2 days a week, helping rebuild interpreter oversight, making sure no other Rashids died because someone valued contracts over lives. I called the literary agent, declined the memoir. My story wasn't for sale. The family's stories weren't for sale. Justice didn't come with a book advance. I called Layla Hassan, accepted her invitation to Rashid's memorial service. The memorial was held on a Saturday in late May at a community center in Arlington. 200 people filled a space meant for half that. Afghan families, American veterans who'd worked with Rashid, interpreters who'd survived when he hadn't. Layla spoke first, her voice steady despite tears. She talked about her father's love of poetry, his terrible jokes, the way he'd sneak candy to his daughters even when their mother said no sweets before dinner. Made him human in a way official records never could. When they asked if anyone else wanted to speak, I stood, walked to the front before I could convince myself to sit back down. I didn't know Rashid Hassan. I never met him, never worked with him, never heard his voice except on a recording from the day he died. The room was silent. But I know what he deserved. He deserved honesty from the people he trusted. He deserved safety when he took risks. He deserved a system that valued his life as much as it valued American lives. I looked at Layla, at her mother, at her sisters. He didn't get what he deserved, but I hope, in some small way, that exposing what happened to him, holding people accountable, making sure his death wasn't hidden or dismissed, I hope that gives you some measure of peace. Your father mattered. His work mattered. And I'm sorry it took so long for the truth to come out. Layla hugged me afterward. Thank you for seeing him, for seeing all of them. The Pentagon work started in earnest by June. Conference rooms with colonels and contractors, designing new vetting procedures, new oversight mechanisms. Tedious but important work. The kind that would never make headlines but might save lives. Derek started at Crescent Solutions the same week. He called after his first day, voice exhausted but satisfied. Layla's terrifying. She caught 3 errors in my first batch, but I'm learning. This matters more than any deal I closed at the bank. Marcus called from his new position with a refugee resettlement nonprofit. Mom, I helped expedite a visa today, an interpreter who'd been waiting 8 years. When I told him, he cried. This is what I should have been doing all along. My sons were finding their way. Not the men they'd been raised to be, but the men they were choosing to become. It was enough. Crescent Solutions' annual gala happened in early June 2025, barely 6 weeks after Vincent's sentencing. Grace had insisted on holding it despite my protests. We're celebrating 30 years of doing this work right, of protecting interpreters instead of exploiting them. That deserves recognition. The gala was held at a hotel in Georgetown. I arrived in a navy blue dress Yasmin had helped me choose, pearl earrings that had been David's gift, the same jewelry I'd worn to the trial, but this time they felt like victory instead of armor. The ballroom filled with people I'd known for decades, interpreters who'd worked with Crescent, military officers, policy experts, and there, together near the bar, Derek talking animatedly with a woman I didn't recognize. Grace found me within minutes. That's Dr. Sarah Kim. She runs refugee services at State Department. Derek met her through interpreter visa work. I think he's smitten. I watched my son laugh at something Sarah said, his face open in a way it hadn't been in years. Good. He needs someone who challenges him. The evening proceeded with the inevitability of all formal events. Dinner, speeches, awards presented to interpreters who'd shown exceptional courage. Then Grace called me to the podium. I'd like to introduce someone most of you know, but few of you really understand. Margaret Rouse founded Crescent Solutions 30 years ago with a simple mission: treat interpreters as partners, not assets. This year has tested that mission in ways none of us anticipated. "Maggie, come up here." I walked to the podium through applause that grew into something warmer. Standing ovations from people whose lives our work had protected. Grace handed me the microphone. I looked out at 200 faces. A year ago, I was invisible in my own family. I'd built this company in secret because I wanted to see who people really were when they thought I had nothing to offer. I found Derek in the crowd. He was watching me with something that looked like pride. I spent 40 years making myself small, hiding my success, letting others take credit for my work. I did it because I was taught that women who claim their power are arrogant, that success in women is threatening. My hands gripped the podium. I'm 62 years old. I speak 7 languages. I've saved lives through work most people never see. And I'm done hiding, not because I want recognition, but because I want other women, especially older women, to know you don't have to make yourself small. You don't have to hide your light to make others comfortable. Claim your power. Use it wisely. And never, ever apologize for being exceptional. The standing ovation lasted until Judge Vasquez herself, attending as a guest, started the applause that brought it to a close. After the gala, Derek introduced me to Sarah Kim properly. She was sharp, warm, clearly someone who valued substance over status. They were good together. I could see it in the way they looked at each other, the way Derek listened when she spoke instead of waiting to talk. Your son tells me you pioneered the vetting protocols we're trying to adopt at state. I just systematized what should have been common sense. Treat people, not like problems to solve. Revolutionary concept in government work. Sarah's smile was genuine. I hope we can collaborate. There are thousands of interpreters still waiting. We need your expertise. Over the summer of 2025, the pieces of my new life began settling into place. Pentagon worked 2 days a week, occasional consulting for Crescent Solutions, monthly Saturday lunches with Derek, who brought Sarah after the third one. Marcus called weekly from his nonprofit, his voice full of stories about visa approvals and refugee families finding safety. He'd found purpose in the work, found meaning in helping people the way I'd spent decades doing quietly. In August, the Interpreter Protection Act passed the Senate. Legislation I'd helped draft, built on the foundation of 23 deaths that should never have happened. It mandated stricter oversight, faster visa processing, financial support for families. I testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee, spoke about Rashid Hassan and why these protections mattered. The bill passed with bipartisan support. A small victory, but victory nonetheless. By November, a full year had passed since the Thanksgiving dinner that detonated my old life. I spent it at Yasmin's house with Grace, Derek and Sarah, Layla and her family. Marcus called from Turkey, where he'd taken a position coordinating visa applications from refugee camps. Mom, I helped reunite a family today. Father who'd been separated from his wife and kids for 6 years. When they saw each other at the airport, I thought my heart would break from how beautiful it was. That's the work, sweetheart. That's what matters. We ate food from 7 countries, told stories in 4 languages. This was family. Not the one I was born into, but the one I'd built from people who chose me as much as I chose them. December brought an unexpected letter from Vincent. Prison stationery, his handwriting. No apology, just philosophical meanderings about legacy and how history would judge him, about how family should protect each other. I read it once, put it in a drawer, didn't respond. Some wounds didn't heal with words. The winter passed quietly. Pentagon work, Crescent Consulting, Derek's relationship with Sarah deepening into something serious, Marcus sending photos from Turkey of families he'd helped, children smiling with visa approval letters. In March 2026, 15 months after Vincent's sentencing, Derek asked me to coffee. Just us, he said. We met at our usual place. He looked healthier than I'd seen him in years. The corporate sheen gone, replaced by something more genuine. I need to tell you something. He pulled out an envelope. This is from Amanda's attorney, an email chain from before the divorce where she laid out exactly how to get you declared incompetent, how to get power of attorney, how to access your money while you were locked in a facility playing bingo. He pushed it across the table. I didn't take it. I was this close to succeeding, Mom. Another month and I would have had you warehoused. I need you to know how close I came to destroying you. And I need you to know that I'll spend the rest of my life making sure I never become that person again. I reached across the table, took his hand. You're not that person now, that's what matters. Sarah and I are moving in together. She's teaching me what real partnership looks like, what it means to value someone for who they are instead of what they can do for you. I'm happy for you. We'd like you to come to dinner. Saturday, Sarah's cooking, just the three of us. Simple, domestic, the kind of normal I'd thought I'd lost forever. I'd like that. Spring arrived with unexpected warmth. Marcus announced he was getting married to a fellow resettlement coordinator, a small ceremony in Istanbul. I flew out for it, watched my younger son marry someone who shared his passion for justice. The wedding was beautiful in its simplicity. Vows in 3 languages, guests from 20 countries. Marcus introduced me as the woman who'd taught him that courage meant choosing right over comfortable. I corrected him. You learned it by watching me finally learn it myself. Flying home, I thought about the year since Vincent's sentencing. Derek had found meaningful work and a partner who challenged him. Marcus had found purpose and a wife who shared it. I had found visibility after 40 years of hiding. Not perfect, not healed completely, but better, growing toward something that looked like peace. June 2026 brought Crescent Solutions' 2nd annual gala, 18 months after Vincent's conviction. The ballroom was even more packed than the previous year. This time, Layla Hassan took the podium. Last year, Mrs. Rauso talked about claiming power, about refusing to be invisible. Tonight, I want to announce something that makes that real. She pulled up a presentation. The Rashid Hassan Memorial Scholarship Fund for children of interpreters killed in service, to help them get the education their parents believed in. Photographs filled the screen. Rashid Hassan holding baby Layla, Rashid with American soldiers, Rashid smiling. My father died believing in building a better world. This scholarship continues his work. And I want to thank Margaret Rauso, whose company is providing the founding endowment of $2 million. I hadn't known Grace had committed that much. $2 million, enough to send 20 students to college, 20 futures that wouldn't be derailed by loss. The fund raised another $1 million that night from donations, $3 million total, 30 students who'd get the chance Rashid had wanted for his daughters. After the gala ended, I went home to my townhouse. The same space I'd lived in for 18 years. I'd been offered bigger places, luxury condos, but this was mine, paid for with my work, filled with my books. I made tea, Earl Grey, the expensive kind, sat at my kitchen table with its chipped corner that reminded me of David. Looked at the photo on the mantel of us on our wedding day, 22 and impossibly hopeful. We did it, I told his image. We built something that mattered. My phone buzzed. Group text from Derek and Marcus. Derek, Saturday dinner next week. Sarah's making that Thai curry Mom likes. Marcus, wish I could be there. Send photos, miss you both. Derek, miss you too, little brother, come home soon. I typed back, Saturday works, I'll bring dessert. Simple, ordinary. The kind of family moment that felt revolutionary after everything we'd survived. I opened my laptop. Pentagon briefing papers to review for Monday. Interpreter applications Grace had flagged for my expertise. Legislation drafts for the next round of oversight improvements. The work of building systems that valued human lives. The work of ensuring no more Rashids died for someone else's profit. The work of being Margaret Rousseau, not Chen, not someone's sister or widow or burden. My own person, carrying my own name, claiming my own truth. Outside, June evening settled into that perfect twilight where day meets night. The world continuing its ordinary chaos while I sat in my small townhouse, doing work that mattered. I was 63 years old. I spoke 7 languages. I'd built an $80 million company in secret and then blown that secret open to expose corruption. I'd chosen truth over family loyalty and survived the cost. I'd spent 40 years being invisible. Being the woman everyone overlooked because I refused to demand attention, refused to claim space, refused to believe my voice mattered. Then I'd spent 18 months becoming visible, destroying my brother's legacy, reclaiming my son's, building my own family from people who chose to see me. The choice had cost everything comfortable and given me something worth more. Integrity, self-respect, the knowledge that when it mattered most, I'd chosen truth. I poured more tea, looked around at walls that had witnessed 40 years of secrets and 18 months of truth. This was my life now, small townhouse, important work, sons who were becoming good men, a family built from choice instead of obligation. Not the life I'd imagined at 22, standing beside David in matching uniforms, believing we could change the world. Better because it was real, because it was earned, because every inch of it was mine. The phone rang. Yasmin. Grace and I are planning a trip to see Marcus in Turkey this fall. You in? Absolutely. Good, we leave in October. Start learning some Turkish. That would be my 8th language. Show off. I laughed, ended the call, added Turkish grammar books to my shopping list. 8 languages, 63 years old, still learning, still growing, still claiming space in a world that had spent decades trying to make me small. I was done being small. I was done being quiet. I was done apologizing for being exceptional. Margaret Rousseau, still here, still unbreakable, still building empires and changing systems and proving that the most powerful thing anyone can do is speak their truth. Even when truth costs everything. Especially then.